staying healthy, staying sexy, staying young is what living life is all about. And if you have doctors that have proven treatments that keep people young and healthy so they don't get sick, you want people to know about these treatments and that they exist.
This episode is brought to you by Gainswave. Gainswave is a treatment done at your doctor's office to optimize erection quality without the needs of Viagra, Cialis. It's non-surgical, there's no needles, and it has an amazing success rate. To find a Gainswave provider, go to gainswave.com. That's GAINSWAVE.com. Hello, this is Mark L. White for Health Hacks, and today I'm honored to bring on board a friend and a colleague who I've probably known now for well over a decade, one of the experts in the field. We have David Bonfa, the co-founder of CRE8 Pharmacy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure being here. Looking forward to this call.
It's always good seeing you. And the thing that ever since I've known you, what's always amazed me is how you're always on the cutting edge, and anything to do with pharmaceuticals, whether it's hormone replacement therapy, or anything else. And I know the big buzzword right now are peptides. Yes,
sir. That's the fun buzzword right now. You know, functional medicine, you've been in it for many, many, many years. I think we met, as you mentioned, many years ago. It's constantly moving. It's constantly moving. And if you don't stay up with the times, you're kind of, you're in last place. So you gotta try and, filter what's coming in, filter what people are talking about, make sure there's some pretty good medical evidence behind it. And then you just go forward, just witnessing the benefits with your patients. I'm sure you've seen that in your years.
So why are people talking about peptides? I mean, let's start with the basics. What is a peptide?
So a peptide, very simply, it's a growth hormone pituitary gland stimulator. And what we're trying to do, with most peptides is we're taking your body, your frame, and we're waking up the pituitary gland, which is the controller of all growth hormone release. So a lot of people don't realize this, but you hit 30, 35 years old, if you're really not taking care of yourself too well, your pituitary gland just kind of falls asleep. It goes on vacation, as we like to call it. And so I think where people get really surprised with a product or a medication that stimulates the pituitary and wakes it up to say, hey, I need you to start working. I need you to start making growth hormone. All of those wonderful benefits of growth hormone being, made and produced by your natural self, you start to feel those amazing benefits. And so it's really a wake-up call. I like to call it the rooster that just goes in there, wakes the pituitary and says, let's get to work.
A rooster, that's a very small rooster.
Very small.
I guess the first question is, why not just replace your growth hormone? I mean, growth hormone therapy has been around now for 30 years.
Great question. I mean, I think that you and I have been in this industry for many years. I started in this industry in 2000. I think you've got more on me on that one. But what I think is the issue right now when you start talking about growth hormone, besides price, which consistently goes up in time. Yes, you're right. Why make your pituitary produce growth when you could just inject it? It's kind of like the shortcut. The shortcut is expensive, number one. Number two, I think doctors, a lot of doctors in clinics out there, they're a little bit worried. Depending on what state that they're living in, sometimes there's this really black cloud over growth hormone. It's taken a pretty bad rap.
Why do you think that is, though? Because like growth hormone shouldn't take a bad rap.
No, obviously not. No, definitely. I just think that there's some abuse in the system, and it's unfortunately been funneled to, athlete status and cheating and, trying to increase growth hormone production. It had this thing happen, and this happened years ago and still today. I mean, I could trail it back to 2005, big major story in the pharmaceutical industry with growth hormone. And then, we're looking 15 years later and we're still talking about that. So there's this trickle of this negativity. And unfortunately, doctors who are not really well versed in, knowing exactly what to prescribe, how many units to prescribe, who's the right candidate, they just say, you know what, I'm a little bit worried, so I need to look elsewhere. Now, the flip side to the elsewhere part of it is that we've now had many, many years of experience with peptides, where it's an active pharmaceutical ingredient that's, activating and waking up the pituitary gland to potentially give you those growth hormone benefits. So I believe personally, now that I've been, in the industry for so many years and talking about peptides for so many years, that I find that the benefit far outweighs, growth hormone with regards to pricing and all of maybe the gray areas that you've seen, and you've heard about. I think it's always best to at least see and almost like a challenge test, Mark, where you're challenging the pituitary to say, hey, can you work? Can you start producing some growth hormone? And most of the time, it does. Most of the time, it does work. And so it's a, quarter of the cost as well. So that's another big component too.
Well, why don't you think it has that same black cloud that growth hormone has if it does the same stuff?
Well, does the same stuff, I think, remember something, this is all pituitary gland dependent. So you're literally telling your body how much can you make. And we see this because certain peptides get better results with certain people than others. Different age groups, different sexes, so it's not everybody has the exact same effect on one particular dose of one particular peptide. It actually varies. It goes up and down. So I think when people are able to find their sweet spot, not only in dosage, but in also what particular peptide they're using, once they get into that comfort zone and that sweet spot, they love it. They love the benefits. And, I think you have to remember that, because some people have tried peptides and it hasn't worked for them, right? They haven't seen any effect. Now, as a doctor, you probably feel comfortable now to say, look, I've challenged the pituitary gland. It showed zero result, not on lab work and not on any physical attributes. So therefore, you could probably say there is a pituitary gland deficiency. Then you feel way more comfortable writing for something like growth hormone. You've got that challenge test in the file. And I think a lot of doctors are, they like that approach better. It's a security blanket approach where let's just see what the pituitary can do. And if it doesn't do what we think it's going to do, I feel more comfortable writing for something like growth hormone. So that's kind of what I've seen in my years.
It's similar to HCG and testosterone, I would imagine.
Exactly. You're always trying to, you start testing with HCG, you kind of see what happens with testosterone levels, and if nothing's happening, then you go, a perfect example.
So peptides, I guess they're proteins at the end of the day, and
they're amino acids. Yeah, they're all
acids.
amino acid chains. What's interesting with some peptides is they're snippets of the actual growth hormone analog, which is 191 amino acids. Some of them are just little snippets of that. So depending on, some of them are larger numbers, like, it could be 1 to 47. That's a big number. It could be a small little snippet. So that's what's also very interesting, Mark, when you start looking at choosing the peptides that are being used right now and being prescribed by doctors. You could really zero in on certain snippets of the growth hormone chain and focus just on fat metabolism, you could focus on sleep. You could focus on, energy, muscle gain, lean muscle mass. You could start focusing and moving around that 191 amino acid chain, which is quite interesting.
I mean, basically what you're saying is like when a patient goes to a doctor, he's not going to a doctor saying, I want growth hormone. He's saying, I want to lose weight. I want to gain muscle. I want better hair. I want better sex drive. And based on his symptoms and what it is he's looking to achieve, the doctor can create a peptide formulation that's customized based around needs.
Of course. And the clinics who have been doing this and have a little bit of traction have quickly realized the benefits of different types of peptides. And so, on a first call, with a doctor who knows nothing about peptides, my goal at the end of that conversation is just to at least give them a little bit of information and help them funnel that patient to the right protocols. And I'm sure you guys do this as well. You sit down, you ask the right questions, you try and get as much information from patients as possible, and then you start to filter into the right program, right protocol.
So generally, if a patient thinks, look, I just want all the benefits growth hormone has, I want to optimize my growth hormone levels, what's the best peptide somebody can use for that?
Well, I think the most commonly prescribed one that we've seen here at CRE8 Pharmacy has definitely been CJC 1295 with Epamarelin. Now, the godfather of peptides out there was Sermorelin acetate, which came out of patent in around 2005, and then some compounding pharmacies started to use Sermorelin back in those days. And that was the only one that was FDA approved. It was a commercially available product. The same company was also making growth hormone. They decided, for some odd reason, to just let the patent go and focus more of their attention on growth hormone. I mean, obviously, I think
That was the old GRF, right?
Jaref, exactly,
Jaref,
Jaref or
right.
Jaref, GRE. So there's a lot of studies behind that. No, it was people loved it and people liked it, and when they weren't able to get it anymore commercially, they turned to compounding pharmacies who were now able to buy the powder and compound, a freeze-dried powder and things of that nature. So that was really the first big push. I think 2005 was when peptides started to get out there in the functional medicine market. Now, fast forward, 15 years later, there's a lot of new peptides that have come to the table. CJC 1295, in my opinion, is almost like Sermorelin's big brother. It is very similar in pathway. It's very similar in benefits. And, a lot of people like CJC 1295 and Sermorelin. I mean, we still have, many patients who, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They like their Sermorelin. But the newer clan now has kind of gone over to CJC 1295. So they're getting things like, sleep, much better sleep is probably the #1 benefit. They're looking at a little bit of a gut fat reduction, a little bit of energy during the day, cognitive function during the day, memory. We've heard a lot of different benefits. Then there was another peptide called Epamarelin, or people usually call it Epamarelin. And this particular one is, I guess, well known for its energy and its recovery, body recovery. So people who use Epamarelin are feeling much better recovery times after a hard workout. They're pushing more, they're lifting more, they're running longer. So we had these two little guys, one that would help with sleep and gut fat, a little bit of energy, cognitive function. Another one that was really more for the exercise guy or girl. And what we've done is we've combined the two. And so now I think our #1 that we see prescribed that a lot of doctors talk about is this combination of CJC 1295 with Epamarelin. It's like the best of all worlds here.
That's the closest somebody will get if they want to replicate a growth hormone optimization program without the growth hormone.
I would say yes. And if doctors are doing the right labs, they should start noticing IGF levels increasing. Again, I have seen in my time, Mark, that sometimes the IGF doesn't raise, but the physical attributes are there. So at that time, at that point, what do you do as a doctor? Do you just say, well, I'm not getting that, that documented increase, so I'm going to take you off of it? I don't know. I mean, people are liking it and they're feeling the benefits. So you need to marriage the two, I think.
So, growth hormone, you take an injection 5 to 7 times sub-Q weekly. Is the same true with peptides?
Most peptides, yes. Most peptides is a subcutaneous injection. Where it gets a little tricky is when you're doing a combination like CJC Epamarelin. One thing I would encourage people to do if they're not doing this, and we've seen this just from, the most common SIGs and directions that we see from multiple clinics and doctors, is that you want to do a 5-day on, 2-day off with something like CJC Epamarelin. In easy English, there are 2 different sets of receptors in the brain that will make these 2 products work separately. If you are on CJC alone, you could do this 7 days a week. And then maybe after 3 months, 6 months, you might start to feel less effect. Your receptors need a little bit of a break. And so if you do Epamarelin alone, same thing. You could do that 7 days. What we've noticed is when combining the 2 together, getting that 2-day break every 5 days actually prolongs the protocol, because you're now hitting both sets of receptors at the same time. So don't maximize that like constantly 7 days a week, 30 days straight. So the 5-day on, 2-day off protocol has been very, very common, and I think has definitely brought, protocols to last 6 months to a year sometimes without feeling any, less effect.
How long does it take before somebody sees results taking peptides?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I've heard people starting to sleep a little better and start notice a little bit of kick in their step or some energy, stamina during the day. It could be 3-4 days in. I still believe, I'm a little old school. You still need to give a peptide a good 30 to 60 day, run to get it into that system. I like to simplify things and kind of, use the analogy of a locomotive. When a locomotive starts, you're throwing the old school locomotives, you're throwing the logs in the pit, it's starting to run. But once it's at full speed, if you stop throwing wood in there, it won't just stop on a dime. It'll take its time. So I always think with peptides, you want to get it to that stage. And then if you want to stop, don't be surprised that you'll still feel some effect as it weans off.
So one of the things that you hear now, 2020, is coronavirus, COVID, and everybody wants to know, what's this going to do for my immune system? Is this the best peptide for immune system? Or are there other peptides people should be looking at?
I would probably say, I mean, it's not going to hurt, but I think if you want to talk about immunology and you want to start looking at immune boosting peptides, there are some very interesting ones that a lot of doctors have been using and getting incredible results. One of them that I think is probably the most popular right now is a thymosin alpha 1. Thymosin alpha 1. Yeah, I mean, you see what happened a few months ago is that clinics, because they weren't seeing patients, had to almost reinvent themselves. They had to think of, okay, how do we get to our patients that are not able to come into the clinic? How do we reach out to them and see how they're doing and continue business as is? So they started working on these immune packages because that was all the rage. That's what everybody was worried about. And so we started to notice a lot of prescriptions coming through that had, the same 3 or 4 items being prescribed. And patients were feeling, great on a lot of these different peptides. So the number one, I would probably say, would be thymosin alpha 1. It's an excellent immune modulator. And at the end of the day, it's simply stimulating the development of T cells. And T cells are working overtime. So trying to stimulate those and not, making them weaker, but stronger has been the number one reason why people have been doing thymosin alpha 1. We have seen thymosin beta 4. I'm not sure if you've heard of this one as well. It also has some literature on immune modulation. But there's a little bit more steering towards repair and, body repair, like tissue repair. So I think personally, the thymosin alpha has definitely been the immune product that people have been steering to. Another interesting product that we've seen prescribed is something called C-Max. And C-Max is a nasal spray that is normally used for anxiety, depression, suicidal tendencies. You've read some literature out there that's showing how this can calm someone down. And normally that's prescribed as a, use as you need it. But we realized in March and in April, people wanted to use this almost every single day. The anxiety levels, stress levels of people just went through the roof. So
it's like a natural Xanax there.
Kind of, but it's still in the family of peptides. And we do formulate that right now as a nasal spray. And it's a small dose, but if people are doing it as a daily nasal spray dose, they're feeling the calming effects. They're feeling less stress. Even mental concentration, just like memory concentration has been improved as well with C-Lank. So C-Lank and C-Max, there's 2 that you might hear from. Some doctors like one over the next. It's kind of a 50-50 if you ask me.
So it's very nootropic. It's like,
big time.
These COVID times, people want better immune system. They want better focus and calming, but they're at home. They have nothing else to do but to have a lot of sex.
That's maybe a good problem to have. No, that's one thing. It's like, stress, get rid of it. Sex, let's have more of it. And then sleep is another big thing. So I think the trifecta, of having all of these things, helping your body, just combat and getting it tougher, to beat a virus, to beat a sickness, not only physically, but mentally, you've got that component. You've got, the libido component of peptides as well, which there are some that do that. Now, it may not be the snippet of a growth hormone chain, but there are some some interesting peptides that we have that doctors are prescribing for that very
So there
reason.
are actually peptides that increase libido where guys want to have more sex, or how about women? Will it help women want to have more sex?
Definitely. There's one in particular that actually just received FDA approval not too long ago that we still compound. We actually make it a little bit different than what's commercially available. It's called PT141. Some people know it as bremelanotide, and some people know it as PT141. PT like Paul Thompson. And this particular product is a great libido enhancer as well, both for male and especially for female when you look at the science.
So if I give this to my wife, she's going to want to have sex with me all the time. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. Put the seatbelt on.
Put the seatbelt on. I mean, I think this is, I mean, if that does as advertised, I think that's a home run.
Well, it's in the family of the PDE5 inhibitors, you know, so it's very similar to, you know, the Viagras and the Cialis for males. Unfortunately for females, there's just not many products out there that really help them with libido. I mean, we could talk about oxytocin and maybe, you know, introducing that hormone into their system. That works sometimes, it doesn't work others. I mean, we could have some fun things with lollipops and we can make fun formulas.
I could think of some fun things with lollipops.
Yeah, so exactly. You know, it's a little bit more on the sexier frame.
Well,
but
oxytocin,
PT141 is definitely it.
Well, oxytocin, you mentioned that. That's not a peptide, correct?
No, this is just a natural hormone that we have. Normally, it's produced when you have orgasm. That's the actual hormone that's being made, is oxytocin. So what we've done years ago is we figured out ways to either make this into a nasal spray, into a sublingual troche. Some people like a lollipop. And, you know, we do different formulations on doctor's request that can be used 30 minutes, 40 minutes before any type of sexual activity. Same thing with PT141. It is an injectable, you know, so that does throw a little bit of a curveball. It works. People love it. But remember, the vehicle is an injection. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things, Mark, I just really quickly want to mention is when you start looking at PT141, a lot of the science shows that this product creates some sort of a nausea effect. But the benefits of the product far outweigh the nausea, which is why it's so popular. People don't care about the nausea if they're able to get an increase in libido, right? We see what's more important.
People are trading up their nausea for better sex.
There you go. That's the trade-off. However, we've formulated PT141 with a B6 add-on. With, you know, pyridoxine for pregnant females has been shown in studies to really help with their nausea type feeling. So we've taken a small dose of B6, of pyridoxine, and we've added it with PT141. It's a great formula, and it actually has many clients who have been on the PT141 alone, who had those nausea effects and went over to an injectable, did notice a difference in less nausea effects. So that's something pretty interesting that now hopefully you don't have to trade nausea for increased libido.
So do you take that when you know you want to have sex, or do you just take that all the time knowing you'll just want to have sex all the time?
It really depends on your sex schedule, as we like to call it. But it is a product that I think people have been injecting 30 minutes, probably up to 2 hours. You know, there's a pretty large window. Once you know your window time, you take it accordingly to that window. But it could happen fairly quick. It could happen 30 minutes, but it could happen, so I've seen some people even go up to 2-3 hours sometimes before they start feeling the effect. And I would say you want to take it before any type of sexual activity.
Does it also increase blood flow?
Yes, it kind of works. Well, excuse me. I want to say this too. It doesn't target the vascular system. So I take that back. It's unlike, that's the only thing it's not like when you look at the PDE5s, okay? It doesn't target the vascular system. It acts more through the nervous system. So that's a big difference between, taking something like Viagra or Cialis or whatever you're calling it and going to PT141.
So going back to, you talked about oxytocin, you said it has that orgasmic effect. Is that like, if somebody's looking for, does it make your orgasms better, or does it make you want to have more sex?
I think it's the mood. I think it's the neurons and the hypothalamus that just put you in that increased sexual desire mood. That's what I would say. But what's really interesting about oxytocin is that mood is actually used sometimes not as a sexual benefit, but just as a calming benefit. So you mentioned before about COVID and how people are, kind of losing their minds at home and getting that cabin fever. They can't really, they can't take it anymore. We've seen oxytocin prescribed for that reason, as it is a calming. I mean, we all know how we feel when orgasm happens. So yes, there's the sexual component to that, but there's also the calming component, which I think could be used in another way.
What I love about you, David, is you're always on the cutting edge. You're always coming up with new creative stuff. Are you mixing oxytocin in with any PDE5 inhibitors or any type of
We
tablets
are.
or anything?
Yeah, I think we see that more with the sublingual troches. We have these, very, very small sublingual dissolvable, tablets. They're a little soft, but you slip them under the tongue. They dissolve in about 30 seconds to a minute. And we do many, many different combinations. I mean, if we're looking at, we've kind of gone to the libido track, but, we could take oxytocin and we could do some combinations with sildenafil citrate, which is the, Viagra active. We could take tadalafil. We could take apomorphine, which some studies show that actually helps with increased erection. So you have, you can have fun in the kitchen, but we want to have some medical documentation. We want to have something. We don't just want to just cook anything up. That's the issue I think a lot of pharmacies are doing right now. They're just making anything a doctor asks them to make. We don't go that far. We still want to see some science behind the combination of products. It's very important for us.
I mean, that brings up a good point because, we've both been in this industry a long time. I've seen compounding pharmacies come and go.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes when it comes to things like peptides, it's almost like the Wild West out there. Like, what should doctors or patients be looking for in a pharmacy? And how do you know,
Well,
are all pharmacies the same?
yeah, it's a loaded question. I think I'm going to answer it this way. I think when you understand the industry and the risks that it brings, you do things a certain way to protect the industry you're in. And so at CRE8 Pharmacy, we are very careful. We don't cut corners with the product we buy. So we're talking the active ingredients. That's a huge, huge component. Active ingredient is so important. When we make and formulate and we make a compound of a product, we outsource the testing as well. We match the results. If everything checks out, we know that the initial product was correct according to our formula. We make sure that nothing is released if we don't get all the right results. Now, can I speak the same way about every pharmacy in the US? I hope so. I really do, Mark. Compounding has enough hits. There are people still talking about things that happened in 2010, and it happened. Yes, a pharmacy made a mistake, let's say, but this compounding industry takes a hit every day. The limits that we have, the restrictions that we're upheld to, it is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But we do it because there's a need for it, and this is our industry.
So you see, I'm seeing like the FDA is starting to regulate the compounding pharmacies, which I think is, in the most part, it's a good thing if it's not too onerous. But yes. I know that like to be able to manufacture injectables, you have to have certain approvals by the FDA. And does that keep out bad apples?
I think it's needed. I think it's needed. I mean, I agree with the FDA to a certain point of, putting guidelines in place. I mean, Mark, I'll give you an example. Years and years ago, you can make capsules on your counter. I could literally just go here and use a capsule machine and make counters. And then at one point, a lot of those ingredients were getting in the air and getting people sick, and guys were growing man boobs because they were making estriol cream, and all of these things were happening. And so guidelines came into effect where, all right, now you need a hood. You need a laminar flow hood. And then the next step was, okay, now you need a room. Well, now you need ventilation. And now you need this type of machinery. And it just keeps going up and up and up and up. So when you look at the investment, and I've said this to one of my pharmacist friends that I've known for many years, I said, 15 years ago, we could open up a pharmacy for $150,000 and do pretty well with it. Today, you need $2 million. It's just the restrictions and all of the line items that you need in order to make the FDA and the state board happy with what you're doing. it's like night and day.
But
for
also
what it
to
was.
to ultimately make a safe product. And you guys are
Of course.
licensed. I know in the U.S. you have to be licensed state by state. How many
Yep.
states are you guys licensed in now?
Right now we're sitting at 33 state licenses. Our objective in Q1 was to attain most of them. COVID didn't help. Government offices were shut down for nearly 5 months. But now that things have started to reopen a little bit, we started to get a few new certificates in the mail, which is always nice. We just want to, we want to fill up our wall, of course, with all licenses. So we're licensed in, some pretty key states. And if we're not licensed just yet, everything is there. So everything is pending approval from the state boards. But that's another regulation where years ago that really wasn't the factor. You could just ship anywhere. Now you need to have, a license in every single state. So a lot of boxes you need to check off when you're running a pharmacy.
Well, I think that's good because it lets you stay cutting edge, knowing that you've made the investment and you have the ability to know going forward. You mentioned something else. You mentioned using peptides for weight loss and also to gain muscle. Is that the same thing you're going to use CJC 1295 for? Or are there other peptides out there? Like if I want to lose body fat, are there any peptides that are just perfect for that?
Yeah, I think, the nice thing with CJC and Epamarelin is that, when you're focusing on your health, Mark, I'm sure you see this, as patients come in, they have a decision to make. And this isn't just take this pill and all this magical stuff's going to happen to you. There is a human, component to this. People need to do stuff. You can't just sit, on your chair and assume you're going to lose weight. So I think if you have that client and that patient who's willing to say, look, I've struggled with XYZ. I struggle with sleep. I struggle with weight. I struggle with mental awareness and focus, my memory, all these different things. They're already prepared to take on a new protocol and take on a new, path. Okay. So I think if you start them off on something like CJC and Epamarelin, what we've seen is, yes, it could help with gut fat. They could get more energy. Hopefully they'll be using that energy in the gym. It is a trickle effect, right? That'll just give them a longer sustained benefit. But then you have people who are just, I really need to lose weight. I'm obese. I can't run. I can't be in the gym every day. I'm just going to fall over. Help me at least in the beginning, lean me out a little bit. Let me see these benefits. And then we could start talking about some other peptides. So there are other peptides that we've seen. One in particular that I know that has been used. It's actually a very small snippet of the growth hormone chain that just strictly focuses on fat metabolism. And that's called AOD 9604. And AOD 9604 is very interesting. It is something that's been used for obesity. We've seen some research in mice. We've seen some research in obesity for cardiovascular risk patients as well. So, very interesting peptide out there. But what I love about it is just a small little snippet of the growth hormone chain that focuses with fat metabolism. And what's really interesting with this is that don't be surprised, as I've seen it time and time again, where there's other benefits that happen. People are sleeping a little bit better. People have a little bit more energy during the day. People are, able to work out a little bit more. Cognitive function. All of these growth hormone stimulators, naturally through the pituitary gland, you could very well see those benefits. But the biggest one that it's known for sure, is just, fat release from obese fat cells. That's really what it comes down to.
I think the biggest challenge too, though, is like before with growth hormone, it was easy. A doctor would prescribe it. Now there's such a menu of options. How are doctors educating themselves so they know what they're doing? And what are you guys doing to promote that?
Well, no, it's a valid question. A lot of clinics are hearing about this. I think we're running out of the in-the-box ideas, if you know what I mean. A doctor can only take care of his patient as much as he's aware of. And so there are organizations, there are conferences that doctors are attending now, very big conferences that hold, seminars and webinars, and you can go in person. I mean, now a lot of these conferences that we normally attend are all virtual right now. So it's a little bit, harder to meet people face to face at a booth and really explain to them how some of your formulas could benefit their clinic. But the training behind it, there are many companies now that are doing some accredited courses as well. So doctors can find some really good teaching out there if they look. I mean, I can mention a few if you want, but I mean, they can look for it.
That's all right. I just think for the consumer, they're listening to this and they're saying, well, what kind of doctor do I need to see? And, I've always said age management doctors, but are functional medicine doctors. But what skills are you seeing out there? Like where should people look if they're trying to find the right doctor to get on peptides?
Yeah, I think right now, the age management, word has kind of been tossed around. I like functional medicine. I like integrative medicine, peptide therapy. If someone's looking and Googling peptide therapy, if someone's listening to this podcast, it's because they understand and they've heard what kind of benefits peptides can bring them. The hard thing, as you mentioned, is finding the doctor that's going to understand peptides fully. Because as I mentioned to you before, Mark, when someone is sitting in front of your doctor's chair and that doctor's not asking the right question, pulling up the right information from this patient who's potentially suffering from multiple different things, if we're not probing enough, we're not going to be able to help them out really specifically. And unfortunately, there's not that many doctors that do this really, really well, where they're able to, remove all the fluff of what the patient really wants and say, all right, you're tired, you're overweight, you're stressed out, your libido's in the tank. There's someone needs to look at that and say, all right, there's a lot of underlying issues, and it might not just be lose weight, that's the easy answer. So I prefer really diving into the system and saying, all right, yes, you do need to lose weight. I get it. However, how are you eating? How's your brain? Are you working out? There's so many additional things you need to start asking.
It's really that whole holistic preventative approach. I mean, like you said, you don't change your diet. You don't change your lifestyle. You live unhealthy and you take peptides. It's still not.
What do you expect? Yeah. What do you expect is going to happen?
There's no such thing as a magic bullet out there.
No.
One of the other things too is you're always being innovative. What's next for you? What's next for CRE8?
Oh, well, you did mention something before about, how regulations and FDA, we're monitoring this because, the FDA, the state boards, these are peptides. There's no commercial there's not many. There's like 2 or 3 of them that are commercially available in the US. So a lot of these are written by doctors who understand the science. And they're patient specific because they know it's going to fulfill a need for their particular patient, and they have every right to do that. So I think we're paying attention to the needs that people are, they're coming up to walls right now. They're coming up to walls with issues, and they're trying to find some solutions for that. I think we have a pretty good menu of, medications and formulations that could help. The big thing is what I'm looking at is what's happening most commonly with patients. What are most patients that we see, being prescribed? What are they really struggling with? And I think right now, Mark, I'm a big, believer that the gut is the brain. There's such a unique correlation that as you heal the gut, you heal the brain. And I think a lot of the clinics who are doing this the right way are having to focus on the microbiome. They're having to focus on what's happening in the gut. And that, of course, leads to other things. So one of the big, products that we really see right now, some of the formulas that we're seeing are something called BPC 157, which I'm pretty sure you're familiar with this. But this has become my favorite just because of how many different benefits this can have on people in different formats, And initially, it's a gut healer. It's really known as a healer. It's a gut healer. And we've seen people heal the gut and feel refreshed in their mind and feel more focused and get their memory back just because they've focused on their gut. And then we've seen people with injuries. We talk about some of these patients who are, obese, who can't really work out in the gym. Their frame is taking on a lot of pressure. So I'm constantly looking at, okay, if this is what's happening in America and people are tired, stressed, not sleeping, obese, unhealthy eating, all of the above,
Anxious as hell.
anxious as hell, how can I formulate certain compounded products that doctors will be like, this is perfect. This is what, my patients need. And we work with doctors because doctors tell us these issues. We're like, hey, like you just mentioned before, can you take this and combine it with it? This is great. That's a triad. That's a patient, doctor, pharmacy relation. That's a beautiful triad. And you need that. So you need to constantly be talking with doctors, talking with patients, understanding both sides, and then working towards, having a menu that's vast enough to really kind of zero in and treat those issues that they're encountering.
Amazing. So if somebody's listening and they want to find out more information, where can they go? How can they learn more about you? If they contacted you, you can refer them to a doctor that is pretty good in their area.
Yeah, I mean, very simple. It's CRE8 Pharmacy. It's spelled this way behind me, CRE8 Pharmacy.com. Reach out to me personally if they need to. That's not a problem whatsoever. We've got a fantastic team here that's able to take care of, anyone that calls in. But yeah, we do this quite often. You'd be surprised how many patients call pharmacies because they know we have something or their friend told them I'm on this and maybe the doctor's too far or maybe the doctor's too expensive or whatever the issue is. If I could help in any way and kind of, steer a patient who's really serious about changing their lifestyle to a doctor in their area, whether it be zip code, state, whatever it is, we'll always do our best to at least put you in touch with someone who knows what they're talking about. That's, the least we could do.
Hey, David, I really appreciate it. And thank you for educating me and our listeners all about peptides. Thank you so much for the time.
Mark, it was a pleasure anytime. I love doing this for you guys. You guys are great.
Thanks. Take care.